Morning. Football's ended. Has that been confirmed? There's still like arena league, right? I'm pretty sure Indianapolis has an arena, or like the Indianapolis area has an arena league football team. Then you got the UFSL or whatever that is. And then you got the football across the pond. I'm sure that's still a thing. The Will-O-Wisp, first time ever in chat, responding to a conversation about football, thus confirming that this should be a football podcast, because that's what gets interaction. That's what gets people to stop lurking and to engage with me, is by talking about something not related to competitive Splatoon. Anyways, good morning, Lacey. Keon. Well, maybe if you talked about good football, Tokapa, you wouldn't be sent the timeout. What the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, Popgun. Okay. Okay. You're good. Thank you. Good football. Stop. You're no Splatoon king of mine. Talking like that. Hello, Admiral Orlock. Admiral? Is the Clam Blitz a football? Power Clam? I guess it literally is a football. It's got like the stripe and everything. But Clam Blitz is nothing like football at all. Rainmaker is closer to football than Clam Blitz is. And that's the one mode people want to get rid of. What mode are they going to add in Splatoon 4? Competitive Turf War. Ranked Turf War. Okay, does team deathmatch actually work in Splatoon? You can just hide in your spawn. Well, actually, I guess you can't do that. It wouldn't work in Splatoon 2, because you could literally just get one splat and then hide in your bubble that they can't enter. But I guess like most maps, you can just spawn in the spot that the enemy can't get to you. They should just make team deathmatch in Splatoon. It literally doesn't work. They would have to recreate the game. Hello, Zippy Tracker. I like how people were calling for plus servers to be, or like the plus server thing to just be like abolished, to get rid of. And Sindo today, announcement. New user page designed for Sindo.inc. We made an update. You can now change your page. It's like, wait, that's what you wanted? It's almost like we've had this conversation every 3 months, and it's not really that important. Acing, you are Sindo.inc, right? Like, what? You can just fix every problem right now, can't you? I thought so. Are you? Is Acing just your burner account? We'll get around. +2 being egregious. We'll get around to that. friends, and welcome back to the Popcast. Whenever you're listening to this, whether it be live or VOD, Twitch or YouTube, while you are putting together charts to scientifically prove that the Plus servers are broken, looking for an alternative to Discord to move the entire community to, DMing a member of the seeding council with your obviously going to make DivX roster, worried that we're going to accidentally place you in Division 1. Whatever it is that you're doing right now, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. Unless I don't. It is officially LUTI Seeding Week, your favorite week of the entire year, where you guys just go to help desk and be like, when are they going to announce the divs? The answer to that has always been they wanted us in the past to turn in the final divisions late Saturday night, like have them done by Saturday night. I don't know if that's the deadline they'll have set for us again this season, but that's what they've always had in the past. And divisions have always come out traditionally on Sunday, so that when week 1 comes around, it's like, okay, immediately you get your div. Here's your schedule week 1. Go have fun. Knock each other out. As I've said every time that I've been on the seeding council, playing tournaments this week, everything you do this week, at least through like the beginning of Saturday, I don't know if like low ink is going to be considered or not, which is going to be a bit awkward if a team wins low ink and they get placed in Division 6 because they did it after divisions were already like seeded or whatever. I don't know how that's going to work. But playing tournaments this week, everything is considered. If you play in an SOS, you play a paddling pool, you play in any open tournament, it's going to be considered for you. And you don't have to tell people like, hey, do I need to update my results? Like, no, like we see all that stuff anyways. So yeah, just play in tournaments. Some of you, I'm not going to name names, but if you haven't played in a tournament in like the past several months, like you are not allowed to say a word about whatever division you get. You can't say a word because there's some teams that I'm just like, why did you even sign up? Like it looks like you don't even enjoy playing the video game anymore. Like you're not going to get a good div because like you don't get a spot placed held for you unless you're FT Win. Like FT Win could stop playing the game for 5 years, come back. We're going to put him in Division X. But you guys just can't just sit on your butt and then be upset when somebody passes you. And it's like, yeah, we're going to reward the active teams and not the teams that aren't doing anything. So some of you, hint, hint, really need to play in some tournaments if you don't want to become under-divved, as they say, which is not something we want to do because that's not fun for anybody. Do not DM people on the seeding council. I don't know if they made it public who all is on the seeding council again this season. But don't leave us alone. It already happened. I kind of made a joke about it, but like, you guys don't have to tell us what your results are. You guys don't have to ask us for a certain div. Just like leave us alone. We're gonna get this right. I have already finished my rough draft of Division X and Division 1. So I'm on a pretty good pace. And my goal is to get 2 and 3 knocked out tonight before I go to bed. And other people, the seeding council, I've already gotten off to a good start as well. Division X, initially last week, I was thinking was going to be a bit watered down compared to it was last season. You're not going to recognize the team names, but when you look through the rosters, you're going to start to realize, oh yeah, there's some really good, strong players that are playing in this LUTI season. So that's good. Div X is going to be pretty bulky. It's just none of the team names themselves are going to be recognizable. The players themselves are going to be. My goal for this week, because I've been paying attention to the LUTI help desk, and I see a lot of people saying they had issues registering with the Google form, and that seems like a lot more work for you guys and a ton of more work for the TOs involved in creating all that. I wonder, is that really required? Like, do we, the seating council, actually need you guys to tell us what your results are? So far, I like I said, I've done Division X and Division One myself. I have yet to look at the results. Like, I didn't care what any of those teams put down. I could find the results for myself that I would need for that rather quickly. Um, because when we ask you guys, like, put down the results you got, or what, to tell us a little bit about your team, you're not going to tell us everything we actually want to know. And it's impossible for you to do that. Again, if you were to beat Moonlight, you're going to put down, hey, we 3-2'd Moonlight in this tournament. Okay, cool. But that's going to disregard the fact that Moonlight beat you 19 times in a row leading up to that. So it's like, okay, this is, yeah, that's technically correct what you're telling us, but you're also like leaving out a lot of other information that would be helpful in determining certain, like how good you actually are. So it's like, do we even pay attention to that? Is the question that I want to figure out. And I don't know, maybe you need to like fill out the Google form for like your team to show up on the like the seating thing that the TOs have created. I don't know. But like I'm always just looking at like, are we working too hard for no reason? I've just seen that Google form and everybody like having issues with it and TOs having like, okay, now try it now. I went back and fixed this one thing. It's like, do we really need that? Because like we kind of we know we kind of figured this stuff out. That was super helpful when this tournament was all on challenge, by the way. So that was damn near impossible without the result thing, but now we can find all that information ourselves more accurately, a lot quicker. News of tournaments that may be of interest to the casual listener of the Popcast. It is also Low Ink Week. I already went to the verification team and it was like, I don't know how helpful I'm going to be verifying players for Low Ink this week, because I'm going to be busy doing LUTI stuff. And again, I have no idea how Low Ink this weekend is going to affect divs that come out the same weekend. Seemingly, divisions might come out during grand finals for all I know. But playing it, you know, you only get so many opportunities to play in Low Ink. For some of you, who knows? This might be the last chance you ever get to play in Low Ink, and then you'll be in the exemption request channel. I haven't played in 2 years. Let me back in. I was like, Anywho, today we are going to be talking to Gem. And the last time I had Squid School on was 2 or 3 years ago. I want to say it was about 3 years ago. And Jim took up the entire segment, so I know better with some of these longer-winded guests to not program around it and just say, I'm just going to open up the floor and let them talk, and then when they're done, rather than be like, we're going to squeeze in some other segments here. So, as we join the call and set up everything, which I've gotten so fantastically better at this. Welcome into the Popcast for the third time. Captain of trigonometry, content creator for Squid School, and the champion of the July 2020 edition of Low Ink with the Greelers, Jim from Squid School. How's morale today?
Things are going A-okay. I've had plenty of time to pet my cat because it's President's Day, so you can't complain too much.
What is your favorite president? Because I assume that's what we're supposed to be doing today, is reflecting on presidents or something.
Um, I mean, I haven't thought about it super hard, but I would probably just be boring and go with Lincoln.
All right, we'll take that.
I feel like that's a cold take, but it's a good one.
You know, there's a lot of wrong answers you can go with, so we'll just take that and move on. What do you remember about that Low Ink from 5.5 years ago?
Oh man. I remember that it was, and I've made an entire video about this, but I remember that it felt like the entire community was coming together to tell us good job, which is something that's so insanely powerful. Like I remember so many people like just popping into our team VC and like having tears in their eyes. Like you could hear that they were choking up, congratulating us that we'd won that thing. It was so big of a moment, and it's something that the village has not come together to celebrate anything that I've done that much since. um, it was really a one of a kind of moment. Um, and I made a video a while back about how there isn't that kind of a moment going forward from there, and that's almost sort of part of I think what we're going to be talking about based on the topics that we'd set up ahead of time, and what the progression looks like from there.
Well, let's start with that then, because that's a good point that I didn't really think about. Is there's been a lot of conversation as of late about how low ink is I guess I shouldn't say overrated, but I think it's more so the narrative about low ink has always been if you start out in competitive Splatoon, you need to play your way through low ink and you need to wait until I DM you that you're banned before you move on to something else. And a lot of people have started to speak up and say like, wait a minute, you don't have to do any of that. And I am the first person to raise my hand and say yes. Low ink is a completely optional thing. So if somebody's coming to you and they say, I want to get involved, I want to like start my journey in competitive Splatoon, what would you tell them? Would you like point them to a certain tournament, or would you say, here's like the certain mindset you should have and just go loose and see what happens?
Um, One of the hard parts about that is that I don't know how strong this player already is. Obviously, if they're getting into it fresh, then they're probably going to be somewhere in low level. But depending on where they're at, there are different events that I would want to be pointing them towards. What I'm more going to talk to them about are things like how to put a team together, how to figure out what your goals are and what you intend to get out of this, how to maybe think about building a weapon comp so that the teammates that you go out and look for are going to be at least a little bit compatible with what you're playing. It doesn't have to be that much. Low level's relatively forgiving in that respect. But it's more going to be about the general mindset things and a few resources for where to find teammates and names of tournaments. I wouldn't say to like tell them you need to play low ink, you need to play from the ink up, you need to play X, Y, or Z thing. I would maybe put those out there as like, here's an opportunity for you. Here's a thing that might be good for your level. If I'm like coaching them a lot more directly and I have a really good sense of what kinds of tournaments they would get positive experiences from, then sure, I'd throw a couple recommendations their way. But it's not like the primary core thing that I'm setting someone on.
I want to start off with LUTI of the things that I kind of said to you today. You made a point, I guess, 18 days ago now, or somewhere around then, about how, hey, wait a minute, why are you just announcing this with only like a couple of weeks for us to kind of put things together? And when you made that point, it it didn't click with me until you made that point. I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of like a short time period to put all this together, because whenever I signed up for LUTI, I already had a team. Like my team was built for LUTI. Like we were ready to go at a moment's notice. But as you're kind of going through, I guess you were in the process of creating a team or trying to like hook up with some other players to do tryouts and stuff. What I guess my first question would be like, what has been your experience the past couple of weeks trying to get a team put together for LUTI, with it being such a short notice?
For sure. At the time that got announced, I was already about a week and a half into the process of doing tryouts for the team. This coming off the back of my hiatus, so it was really a moment of just brand new, fresh, reconnecting with the scene again and trying to find folks to play with. Now, I have to think that the fact that I'm somewhat known in the community makes it a little bit easier for me to find teammates who are willing to play with me. Um, and I think that it's, if anything, going to be more difficult for people who aren't well known in one room of a convention center twice a year, you know? Um, so I have to think that I probably ended up with more people who were willing to try out than the average mid-level player who's trying to captain a team. And even so, with a lot of people who were interested and a lot of people trying out, figuring out over a couple of play sessions at least that I try to get with each player before I make a decision, trying to figure out the scheduling so that we could hold those tryouts, trying to figure out combinations of those players to play with so that we don't put together a team comp that's just obviously not going to work very well and that gives them, you know, an unfair chance in the tryout. I had probably at least 10 or 12 players that went through the tryout process with me, and giving them all their fair shot and scheduling all of that, that was it. I want to say at least a 3-week process. And that is a week and a half into that process getting rushed because I'm realizing, oh, we need to have a team by this date and ideally have some time to practice with them before then. So there were definitely some decisions that were made a little bit faster than I probably would have if LUTI hadn't been announced. I probably would have taken maybe another week and a half, 2 weeks or something to make sure that that got played out. I wouldn't have rushed people to play quite as much as I did. And that was something that I feel like if someone were trying to build a team from scratch, starting when LUTI got announced, which I think is the case for a lot of people. I think a lot of people don't have a steady team and are just playing pickups because of ways that you kind of get matches in the competitive scene right now. A lot of people just play Sendo queue. A lot of people just go into like plus server pickups or other pickup scrim servers and play that way. So if they were starting from scratch like that and they wanted to play LUTI, they've really got to get their act together fast, and they've got to hope that they can find teammates who are willing to play with them, and they're probably going to be willing to make some compromises on who they're playing with if it means that they've got a team.
You know, in the higher levels, you see more pickups in general. So I think for those kind of players, and we're kind of seeing that as we're looking through what Division X is going to ultimately end up being. It's like, okay, all like pretty much all these teams are pickups, but all these players are just kind of used to playing with each other anyways. Pickup culture, obviously, the lower down the ladder you go is the less common thing. Makes sense to start out in the scene. You usually have 3 other people you want to grow with initially before you start branching out. Have you received? I mean, it's not like LUTI had to respond to you, but I'm just curious if you've seen any kind of explanation or any kind of like thought process behind why the tournament has always been kind of announced with like a 2-3 weeks heads up.
The one thing that I did see was a response from Toasty, who, and I would have loved to pick their brain a little bit more about it, but they seemed to suggest that if they announce too early, they kind of lose momentum in the sense that, I guess, it ceases to be the topic of discussion on social media. It's not something that people procrastinate. Basically, it's kind of like if you give someone too long of an assignment time for like their essay or whatever, there's no sense of urgency, and now they're trying to do this whole big project in the last few minutes. And whereas if you gave them maybe like 2 days to do it, they'd be like, okay, I've only got 2 days, I've got to buckle down. So that's the most plausible explanation that I've seen. That being said, I've never been on LUTI staff. I've never been behind the scenes of that org enough to hear what the TOs would really tell me about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a better explanation than I think there is. But I do also see on my end, having been a player, I think there genuinely are some negative consequences to it. And I'm willing to be wrong, but I feel like those consequences might not overshadow. I feel like those consequences might be worse than the consequences of it losing a little bit of momentum, especially given how central, how fundamental LUTI is to the scene. LUTI being this way that, for better or for worse, people will refer to their own skill level and ping for scrims with.
LUTI is the oldest tournament in existence today. Low Ink debuted like a few months before Paddling Pool, but by the time Low Ink came out, LUTI had already had like 5 or 6 full seasons already completed at that point. So LUTI's like way older than any other tournament that's still around today. And you see a lot of those old things kind of trickle down. Like it was on Challenge forever, which, so be it. It works out. But if you want to look up any information on LUTI 2 seasons ago, good luck. Like, you're just going to get a team name. You're not going to get any information other than that from the site. And this is just what LUTI has always done. And you were probably the first person to point out, like, hey, wait a minute. Like, why are we doing this? But the concept of announcing tournaments way ahead of time is something we've tried to implement within IPL this past year. We were like, wait a minute, we tell people about Riptide in February. Like, why don't we do that with our other major events? So we started doing that with Super Jump. And where I think we failed with that announcement of like, here's what all the Super Jumps are going to be, is we didn't do a good enough job of reminding people over the course of the year, like, hey, there's a Super Jump coming. The next one's in like 2 months. Here's the commercial for it or something like that. So yeah, like the lost momentum thing can be countered by, well, just if you keep reminding people of it, they're going to be interested into doing it.
Some of the best marketing that I have ever seen for a tournament, it was for a Melee tournament in Colorado. And what they did was they started very early on. They had some top player that had decided to go to the event. And usually the procedure was for TOs to reach out to these top players and be like, hey, if you come to our event, we'll pay for your housing. Like it's just worthwhile to have that person come because it will bring in more people. And so their presence is actually financially worth putting that money down for them. That's kind of the deal that a lot of the times they get. So they'd have some top player and they'd announce that one top player. But then a week later, they'd announce another top player. And a week later, another top player. And it just, like, every time there was a new top player who registered, they put out that top player's name. And it was one at a time, picture after picture. After a while, that gives you the sense that, wow, everyone is going to this tournament. And that has a domino effect where, if someone plays your favorite character and that top player is the one who's going to be there, now you're more engaged than you would have been for any of the other top players. So it's like both that process of reminding people and also, hey, here's something that's happening. And it doesn't even have to be something that's new. It could be something that's just a part of the event that you've been planning the whole time, but you reveal it piecemeal or something like that. Here's this team that's going to show up. That sort of thing works really, really well at building that momentum instead of just trying to like keep it on cruise.
Do you think LUTI, we talked about how Low Ink has this narrative about it of like, oh, this is a tournament you are required to play in. Do you feel like LUTI, the main draw of LUTI is that it is a tournament that people feel like they need to play in? Like, why are you specifically playing in LUTI this upcoming season?
That's a good question. So one of the first reasons for that is just that we had a really good experience of it back when, sorry about my phone going off. We had a really good experience with it back at our very first one. This is how I know you.
Yeah.
I know you because we played in LUTI way back at the time. We were teams that were pretty close to each other at the time, and we made for great scrim partners. It was an immediate like starter pack of teams to play with, friends to make, and competitive practice to have that got us up to higher levels very quickly. It's something that's fantastic for a new team, for learning the organization that goes along with it, for dealing with tournament nerves, because that sort of practice and that being so common, and also having this long to set up for just one single match to do your research, to learn how to adapt to what you think that other team is going to bring, to learn the map list. That's a level of preparation that I think really forces teams to go through the way they play with a fine-toothed comb. And I think that it's also a good test of just your ability to commit to the project of getting better at the game. It's not something where you can just say, I don't feel like it this week, because your team depends on you being there for them to keep competing in LUTI. I think it's great, especially early on, for finding your footing there. And I think going forward still, I've liked supporting it in part because of that drumbeat of you being forced to do things that help you improve. And also just because, I don't know, I still think of LUTI Division as something that matters somewhat. I still want to be able to say, I am this div, and I want that to be up-to-date information, because that is a way that a lot of people will still ping for scrims in other places.
Yeah, but those divs are obsolete like 3-4 weeks into the thing. I mean, like it becomes very obvious. It's like, oh, okay, this team is clearly a step above everybody else, but they're still stuck in that division for another month of playing in that, and they still have that division stuck next to their name for another year, or they just start, well, now I'm estimating that I'm this division or something like that. Do you honestly care about the exact number div that you want? I mean, I know at the end of the day, you just want to be in the right one, because being over divved and under divved is not fun for anybody. But that number, do you honestly care what like number trigonometry will get?
I think that even if you're estimating, that gives you at least a framework to estimate in. You can go and say that someone is 2700x power, and that does mean something, but that also isn't a number that tests their ability to coordinate with a team. LUTI divisions are a number that test your ability to coordinate with a team, and they're a lot easier to communicate to someone than saying, oh, we beat this team. Oh, you haven't heard of that team? Crap. What teams have you heard of? Oh, you haven't heard of any of the teams in this division. Okay. Like, that's the way that the conversation has to break down. Otherwise, it's a good shorthand that gives you at least a rough idea. There's low level, mid level, high level, but if you want to get any more distinction than that, LUTI division is the next best thing, I think.
Moving on to the conversation about mid level, and the really reason that we're having this kind of conversation at all is because Jared has started to put together a pickup for LUTI, doing tryouts with players that were, I think Jared was looking for like Div 3 to Div 1 kind of range. Um, and came to the conclusion of like, oh, that stuff you guys have been saying about mid-level sucking, I understand it now, because I actually have like been in that world for a little bit. Um, and this is something people have been griping about for for a long time, and I get it. And I feel like we're going to have these same conversations 2 or 3 years from now. When it comes to the actual defining of what is like low, mid level, and high level, I've always had an issue with that, because it's just whatever you want it to be. Like, what is mid level exactly? You want to say it's when you're too good for lowing, whether you get banned or you win it, or you just get the results that would have just like had me gripe at you if you tried to sign up with it anyway. Okay, I'll give you that. When do you stop becoming mid-level and become high level? That's just whenever you feel like it, essentially, because there's no like way to kind of like there's no way to signify that change. Um, so I guess like what would you define mid-level as, or do we even need to define what it is?
That is a tricky question. Because The transition between low and mid level is so structurally baked into the community. Nobody is going to go and say that someone is a high level or top level player just on the basis that they won low ink. Usually, when you win low ink, and there are some teams that have trajectories that go far beyond this, but usually when you win low ink, you get dumped into a tournament landscape where you are the weakest team out there now, and you have to work your way all the way back up from getting O2'd over and over again. And it's at some nebulous point, some like gatekeeper level, where now you are capable of, say, winning the tournament, of, say, beating some goal level player. Um, I would say like high level is probably a point where you are some kind of tournament risk to a top team, to a team that's potentially going to win the event. Might not be that you're going to take the set, but you could definitely take a game, that you could definitely catch them off guard in some cases. That's kind of roughly where I see high level. And I could see anything from a really strong like Div 2 team upwards being able to do something like that. Um, and do it in some weird ways. Like I think of the Cherry Limeade is a great like standout example of a team that could probably beat anyone in at least a game on a given day because they might just do something you've never seen before. A team that has at least the mechanics to be able to pull off something like that is probably where I would draw the line if I had to draw a line. Now, I would say that I am mid-level and that I haven't crossed that boundary yet. So maybe my perception will change if I get up to a point where now I'm like, am I mid? Am I high? I don't know. But the traditional break off point for that so far has been around Div 2. That once you're getting up in Div 2, you're starting to win in Div 2, you're not a mid level team anymore. Maybe it's Div 1 specifically, maybe it's like partway through Div 2, something like that is roughly where the line has traditionally been drawn.
Uh, what do you make of Jared's I'm sure you saw Jared's post. I'm sure it's like the
I
catalyst
have written a 5-page script on that, actually.
The one point that kind of stood out to me, and I think has been like a core problem for a long time, is that mid-level just hates each other. It doesn't do a whole lot to kind of help each other out. Do you think that's a fair statement to say?
So I think that I have a lot of thoughts. One of the immediate thoughts that I had about this is that one top level player tweeting something is always like sending shockwaves through the Splatoon community.
Yeah.
Like we radically alter the way that we see the community and the game on the basis of like an individual tweet. And I can think of multiple instances just this month where that has happened. Like it's not just the Jared tweet, it's also why everyone is playing V Heavy right now. Kyo made one tweet about one game, and now everyone is playing V Heavy. I've got a video about that one tweet in the works right now.
It's
like
a painting machine all of a sudden, yeah.
There's so much power that we give their words because, for one thing, we hear so little of their words. Anytime we do hear their words, that becomes a pillar on which we put our understanding of the entire scene, the entire community, the entire game. Because we're like, these are the top experts. This is what they think. And we forget sometimes they disagree with each other. I think that what Jared had to say is absolutely a valid interpretation of it. It's not the way that I see it myself 100%, because I think that there's a lot of negativity attached to it, which is caused by reasons. But I also think that a lot of the time with specifically mid-level players, the problem is that they take something that is a setback, that is a structural problem, and they allow it to become their entire experience of the game. They allow that negativity to infect everything. When a team that goes rapidly from mid-level to top level, you do not see that negativity at all. They will roll their eyes like, yeah, that's so annoying that we don't have that many tournaments. Anyway, let's set up a scrim. And they just, whether there's a will, there's a way, right? They want to get better. And so they grind with whatever resources they're given to grind, and they do end up getting better. And they do not stay in mid level for very long a lot of the time when they have that kind of mindset. So I think that it is definitely something that's worth it for us to talk about. I think it is a valuable thing for us as organizers to consider, because our job as organizers, the way I see it, at least up until the point where we have to DQ people for being late, is to coddle people as much as possible. I think that we need to be as soft as possible to make it as easy as possible for people to get in, and that once people can get in to the community, then they can develop the growth mindset. Then they can grow tougher skin. Then they can, adapt to the situation they're in. But if they leave before we get the opportunity to teach them those lessons, then we've just lost someone. So I'm here to try and say, yes, we should look at these things as admins, as community leaders. We should try to think about the pipeline that we're putting people through. But as players, I don't think they should think that hard about it. I don't think they should look at their experience of the game and say, oh, this top player says that my life is miserable, therefore it must be. That's not a way that I want it to be taken, and I worry that that's something that's starting to grow in some people's minds that, if anything, is only going to hold them back more.
I do want to double back to a point that you made about us needing to be softer as tournament organizers in certain situations. Could you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So my theory of community organizing is that your value to the community is measured by how many people you bring in versus how many people you drive away. I'm going to tilt the camera down so you can see the cat. The way that kind of works in tournament organizing, like I've been a Melee TO. That was really one of the big things that I did in college, was build up the Arizona Melee scene. And as a part of that, I would always see that, like, in our Facebook group, which was where we ran things at the time, there would be hundreds or even thousands of people, and then we'd have 50 people show up. And I was always wondering, like, how do we have that big of a discrepancy? And so I started, like, looking at the players that I only saw one time. I started thinking, like, let's pay attention to every single person and not just the ones who are loudest in the room who show up that I know really well. Like, what's happening with them? What is their experience of the scene? And I would notice things like them maybe not having a friend right away, them being confronted with someone who's trying to teach them every single thing about the game in 19 minutes when they aren't even sure whether they want to play even in this tournament, let alone come back next week. I would see things like that. And then my job as the tournament organizer, as I saw it, to get them to keep coming back, was to give solutions to those problems, to make it so that those things that drove people away were now replaced by systems that would incentivize them to come back again. I tried to develop systems so that they could figure out where their rank was. I tried to meet people and say hi to every person, tried to learn their names and remember their names. I would try to figure out what characters they played so I could point them in the direction of someone who could help them out and, like, make introductions so that they could get over that. Those things, I don't necessarily see it as coddling per se, but I would absolutely coddle someone who I think has a weak mindset. I wouldn't immediately be confrontational about that, because something that I think living in this political moment and everything has taught me is that if you want to teach someone something, you have to have a relationship with them first. You can't out logic someone at something and just expect that that is always going to result to them changing their minds. You have to have some kind of, I don't want to say social leverage because that sounds manipulative, but, like, you have to have something that they want. You have to have some value to them already. And it is when they come into conflict that jeopardizes whatever that is, jeopardizes that relationship that they like, that they have with you, or jeopardizes, their, maybe gives them cognitive dissonance. Like, wait, I'm a friend with this person and they believe this and they think that this hurts them. I think you have to have a relationship built up first, and then that stuff can come later. I don't think that you can just say you should have a better mindset and expect that person to show up the next day. They probably just don't. So that is where I'm coming from. You need to have some kind of rapport built up. You need to give someone a reason to stay before you're going to be able to teach them the really hard life lessons that are such a big value add to being a part of a community like this.
Being part of this community and then continuing to grow, when we're talking about like climbing the ladder and getting to whatever mid level is and going up to the next level, I think what people realize once they leave the low ink world is that in order to make that next step, okay, this is going to be more difficult than what I've had to do. I'm going to have to VOD review more. I'm going to have to grind the game more, and that's anything in life. You know, you climb the ladder of your job. In theory, the higher up you go, the harder the work is. Sometimes it's the exact opposite of that, which is kind of messed up. But in theory, anything you do in life, the better you get at it, the harder it is to take that next step. Is it fair to say that yes, there's a lot of things that can be done to improve the quote unquote mid level experience, while also kind of realizing that some players are just going to be stuck here because they don't have the additional time or resources or even the care to like take that next step?
Absolutely. And that was the main thrust of my video that I made a while back. It's that a lot of the time people get into pipelines, they get into these systems that are trying to train them to be something. And those pipelines are usually very well designed, carefully curated, well trodden paths that if you follow, you will get to the place that's advertised. But a lot of people never question whether they even wanted to get to that place in the first place, whether there's a point at which they want to get off the ride, whether they want to go in the complete opposite direction and do something different that nobody had thought to provide them with before. And I think that a lot of the time people get into, say, the low ink pipeline, they get dropped off like, here it is. This is exactly where you said you would be. You are now mid level. And you get to mid level and you're like, do I care anymore? I'm not sure, actually. Like they kind of lose this external motivation. And sometimes they don't have an internal motivation to keep going. Sometimes that's because of circumstances of their lives. You and I are both adults. I'm sure you know as well as anybody else that there are other things in life that are important and also time consuming that might take away a little bit from your ability to play silly Squid Game. But sometimes it's also a mindset thing. Sometimes people want to be validated, and that's what they came here for. And now they're not getting that anymore. They got it one time at low ink, and they're not getting that. And it'll like, wait, I have to work even more for this, and they just kind of shut down. Some people weren't along for for the process. They were here for the results. They weren't here for the journey. They were here for the destination. They get to the destination, and now they're like, well, the next destination would be what? Like, when is someone ever going to care about what I did as much than if I like the next time is probably if I win a LAN or something. Like I'm going to have to go that far at least before anyone will congratulate me the way that they congratulated me for winning low ink.
Well,
And I think
an
that
event,
motivation doesn't work.
where does an event like SAC come into play? Where we're talking about, okay, well now let's just raise the cap on the skill cap tournament and have people play in that and get to something. Because I went through SAC and I loved it. And I know we played you guys plenty of time back in the day in that tournament as well. But eventually it's going to be the same problem. You're going to get banned from SAC and you're still not going to be competitive against FTWin. You know, it's like, okay, well now what's next? And then what was that, like Midway or something? It was like, this is a Div 1
Midpoint.
cap. And it's like, well, if we're having a Div 1 cap, what's the difference between that and an open tournament? Like, do you think tournaments like SAC are a solution, or it's just kind of extending the problem, kicking the can down the road?
I think that there is a major cultural transition point between low level, and especially high level, and mid level leans more in the high level direction. There's a point at which the cultural norms, the way that we behave, the way that we play the game, just completely alters. Um, and it's really difficult because there are a lot of players who really got to mid and high level very quickly, and that's been the culture of the game that they've learned with that whole time. There are some teams maybe who have been playing the game for 5 years and only now have just won low ink, and they're used to the way that people behaved in low level. Now going into mid and high level, it's culture shock. Um, I don't know how we bridge that gap, because in order for that to really be bridged, the two have to be in more contact, have to like have more shared norms, have to interact with each other more. We don't have a ton of reasons for that to be the case right now. I think that's really one of the sad things about like the plus servers, for example, is that being in those servers is something that not everyone gets to be in, but the people who are in them probably spend a lot of time in them, and they just kind of become islanded from each other. Whereas in the Melee community, that was an in-person esport. I could walk up to a top 100 player and ask if he wanted to go out and get food, and he'd probably say yes. And I developed a relationship with that top 100 player. I got into hotel rooms with other top players who wanted to play with that top 100 player, and I got to play with them. I got a ton of experience. I got a ton of value from just knowing that guy, on top of the fact that he was a really cool guy and I liked being friends with him. I just don't feel like there's as many reasons right now for those kinds of relationships to form, because people don't run into each other there. And I don't know how to fix that exactly. So pointing out what the problem is helpful, but it's a lot easier than finding the solution.
And that's what I thrive on here at the Popcast, pointing out the problems, and then nobody comes up with a solution. That gives me something to talk about again next year. Just keep recycling material around. Have you ever...
That's content mind.
Have you ever wanted to be in the plus server? Because I remember when midpoint was a thing, and I would routinely not say nice things about midpoint on the pop, but I mean, this was back in like 2021. I mean, most of the chat wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, but it was just like, okay, we all agree that a thing where we have to vote in is going to have a lot of flaws to it. It's going to have issues, and you can come up with these problems to where there's like a majority that decides who comes in and who doesn't. And we're just extending this further and further down the ladder. But the plus servers have been here for a while. And I've had Shaq on before who said, look, +1 was a thing long before anybody knew it was a thing. And if you get rid of it, it's just going to come back in another private sector. But have you ever wanted to be in +3? Like, have you gone through the grind of trying to get into that?
I have been through playing in midpoint, which really was kind of just I would call it a +4. I think that's honestly what that was. It was just exactly the same procedure and everything, but a step below +3. And like, the short answer is I didn't end up playing enough of those matches for me to be like well ranked or anything, and I think I ended up just like not getting the votes at one point and not caring to try and get back in. There were a couple of issues with it. One of them was that kind of culture shock that I was talking about. It just didn't feel like my people. It felt like I needed to have connections already on the inside for people to really have that much of an investment in the matches. Sendu Q has been really interesting because I've gone in being like, man, my rank is lower than I think my skill level actually is. I want to grind and get some points. And then I go in and some like diamond level player is just like, oh, hey, come join me. That's not a thing that ever happened in any of those servers. And I think I've learned more from those experiences than I have from trying to play closer to my level, because those players were giving a lot of good advice to try and be able to win the match in spite of the fact that I was below their level. So I think that's something that's a significant weakness of them, that it's islanding, it's isolating, and it forces a lot of comparison between you and other people. It feels competitive between you and them and not cooperative for how you get in. I think another thing that it does is it forces a very results oriented experience instead of a process oriented experience. You need to have a process to improve. You need to have plans for how to get better, not just how to play at your peak at that exact moment. There are times for that. But those are tournaments. Those are individual tournaments. You play the best you can on that day. It's a day by day thing. Most of the time, you want to be in a process of learning and improving. And that's not something that those kinds of scrims are generally designed for. Like every single time you play with someone, even if it's supposed to be like low stakes or something, they're judging whether they want to vote you in next time. So I think that the incentive system doesn't work super well. My big problem with it is just that it wasn't designed for this at all. It wasn't designed to become a fundamental fixture of the community the way that it has been. And I suppose you'd probably say the same to me. Well, that's not what LUTI was supposed to be like either. But I think with the Plus server, it's even more so, because it was an informal private server of players, and the only reason that they branched out in the first place was that everyone was like, hey, wait, all of the players who are in that server are getting better practice than me. I want in. Informal networking could have been the way that happened. Like the group just could have splintered, and there could have been a lot of different pathways up to get to play with those different players. But I think there will always be a little bit of exclusivity at the very top, because those players want to be with people who will give them good practice. I think the further down you go, the more that voting system breaks down. Like it only works at a certain level of social organization. I don't think it works community wide to be this method. So what I've said about it at the back in my videos is I think that being in the Plus servers absolutely says something about you. It says something about your ability to play this game at a high level. I think that not being in the Plus servers doesn't mean anything.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up, is that, oh, I don't have that +3 next to my thing. And that means, well, okay, but when you start the game, you don't get any bonus points if you have a 2 or a 1 next to you. But as somebody who does seeding, that does stand out to me. Like, oh, you do have like something next to you. This other team doesn't. Therefore, like, you have to, I know I shouldn't think that way, but that is like, I can't deny that's not something that doesn't stand out. But also, this past voting cycle, it's been pointed out, +2 has been the ire of a lot of people's
it's always
frustration.
+2.
Well, but before it was +3. Remember, +3 would have, oh, we're having a purge month. We're just going to get rid of a bunch of people. This was like 2 or 3 years ago.
That was +3? Okay. I do remember that.
Yes. And I think, I mean, you look at the people that were in +3 like 3 years ago, like most of them don't even play the game anymore. It's like a completely different cycle through. The +3 now, 187 people in +3. Like the +3 players from 3 years ago are like, what happened here? Like, you guys are just giving this away at this point. But yeah, +2 having a like 50-ish range. Like, okay, if the point of this is to have active practice, like, this isn't going to cut it. Like, there's got to be more than this many people at this kind of skill level. One thing a lot of people have brought up, and I haven't seen anybody in like the actual Plus servers bring this up. I stand corrected if that's the case, but a lot of people outside the Plus servers have said, we need to abolish this thing. Like, we need to get rid of it. It doesn't work. Do we really have to get to that point? As much as I don't like the Plus servers, I don't see them as harmless, a thing that needs to be destroyed, I guess.
I think that, like a lot of tools that we have in the community, it's not the tool itself that is the problem. I think it's the way that we've responded to it and the mindset that we've built around it. And you could probably argue that there's an incentive system in place that promotes those mindsets, but I also think that there are plenty of people who just go in with healthier mindsets and come out the other side okay. So I definitely like, I would say, if you're going into it, to make sure that you have your goals in mind, you have your sense of your own self in mind, that you know who you are as a player, you know what you want to accomplish, and you see this thing not as your identity, but as something that is a tool in your belt to get you to where you want to go. Um, that's one really important thing that I think a lot of people don't go into those kinds of systems with. And they start to really hyper focus on like that percentage of people who voted for me. And really just as soon as, a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric. Um, so I I think that we should maybe de-emphasize it, that it shouldn't be like this is the next step. It should be, hey, this is a way you can help yourself get to the next step. I'm kind of torn on like its implementation into like Sendu and like its role in the rating systems there, because on the one hand, again, like you said, it helpful seeding resource. On the other hand, like it cements this what started as a social group as this foundational way that we view player rankings in the game. I think that that's outside of its intended purpose, and I think putting it alongside of ranking infrastructure may not be the best call for us. But I agree that I like I'm not here trying to be some like I believe in the First Amendment. You do whatever you want to do, man, as long as it's not hurting other people. And I don't think that just the server existing is hurting other people. I think that if you feel like you're not having a good time in the server or you're being hurt by it, you're not wrong to point out what problems you think there are with it. But I also like, I think the answer to something going wrong with that server is for people to leave it because it's not suiting their needs. And I think that there are a lot of people who don't realize that it's not suiting their needs. People who don't have enough of that sense of self to realize they would learn better by doing something else. And that I think is really the crux of the problem.
Well, when you talk about mid level, this is something I've been saying for years now. At this point, is one of the problems being players are pressured to get results quickly so that they can find ways to like climb up the plus server ladder, so to speak. And that leads to situations to where somebody will form a team and that team won't last long enough because for you to like really become a solid team, it's going to take some time, but you're pressured to get the results quickly so you don't stick around. Oh, we didn't get this tournament. We didn't get this certain placement. All right, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to keep doing another pickup until I eventually find the people that are going to get me the results that I need. And if you get rid of the plus servers, I'm not convinced that that mindset is going to go away. Yeah, the structure is there for something to point to, but it's more so how the players interact with that structure that's the problem. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Absolutely. You what you just described is what I was saying with results oriented versus process oriented thinking.
But we say that
if you have a good
and top level players say that same exact thing as well. But everything like everything's built around results. Like LUTI Seeding, I results are all I have to go off of to put somebody in a div. Like that's it, so I get it. But like
but the way you get those results is with the process. The results can't be the only thing you're trying to do. There has to be a point at which you say, I'm not getting the results that I want. Therefore, I need to break down the way I'm playing the game and build it back up from a better foundation. There are times where you have to reset a little bit and your results will probably dip a little bit while you're doing that. Maybe you're learning a new weapon. Maybe you're starting off with a new team. Maybe you just have a different way of practicing. Maybe there's a coach who's telling you, hey, this is a thing you've got to learn. Just grind this in practice at the expense of all else for a little bit. And those kinds of things do help. Experimentation too. That people don't play enough. They don't mess around with the express purpose of learning if this thing would work enough. I think that people can really stand to benefit a lot from trying to adapt to novel situations instead of putting themselves through the same ones over again. Um, and those things take some time, but those are the ways that these teams that I've seen go from mid-level to high level very quickly. That's what they're doing. I don't think that I used to play, for example, with some members of Orca Balestra, and I remember practicing for there was some land that I played with them, and them being like really solid to play with. It just felt everything felt easy, and I realized like from listening to their conversations, oh, they're playing the game twice as much as I am. I used to be teammates with Femi. They're now Div 1 and much better at the game than me. Part of it was just them grinding the game a lot. Part of them was just playing more. That's not something that's going to necessarily lead to results. I'm sure they got plenty of results along the way, but I don't think it's the results that got them there. I think it's the practice. I think it's everything they were doing behind the scenes. You could get a team that just plays a whole bunch of high level scrims, never bothers to compete in a tournament, and as soon as they do finally go to another tournament, they're going to show you that they deserved to be a high seed. You're only going to make that mistake once.
Before I let you go, there's another thing that kind of popped up the last couple of days that I want to get your opinion on. Discord has been a little weird the last couple of weeks. They've been talking about doing age verification that might require like a photo ID. That's been kind of like back and forth if that's going to actually happen or not. There's been some reports coming out about like today talking about how Discord and other social media websites might be playing a role in assisting ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. So there's been some rumblings about, hey, maybe we should get off of Discord as a community. Is there a way to where the community could get off of Discord? And is there like even something that's a remote possibility of being an alternative to it?
That is a tough question. We've relied on this heavily. I'm sure there are plenty of software options. The question is, whatever it is we decide to move to, whatever the next best thing is, can we communicate that to the community and move them off unilaterally enough and get those solutions out there? It's the same kind of issue that you see with like tournament announcements. Like there's not a ton of branding built up around the real big community leaders, tournament organizations. It's only a small fraction of people that's going to, even with any content creator, it's only a small fraction of people that are going to see something if I tweet it out. They're going to see it needs to be a very large migration to whatever it is we're going to do next. And we're probably going to lose some people along the way if we have to do that. I really hope that the politics plays out in such a way that we don't have to be having that conversation. It is a conversation we're going to have to think about very quickly, though, if that's something that is going to be on the horizon for us. Because safety is the number one priority that we have. Like, I would rather that someone drop out of the competitive Splatoon scene than do something that puts them at risk of being targeted by the government. So if it does come down to it, like I'm absolutely down to shutter things that I've got built up on Discord. That's something I probably do need to look into because I haven't put a lot of thought into exactly where that's going to be. And that's a conversation that with community leaders, like everybody needs to kind of get together and have one answer to that question if that day does eventually come.
Did you watch Genesis at all this past weekend?
I've probably watched more of the Melee and Uma Musume than anything else, but yes, I have seen a little bit of that.
Isn't it crazy how Melee hasn't gotten a patch in like what 2 decades, but we're now seeing Donkey Kong, we're seeing a Rat Monster with Luigi like do these things that like the character didn't change at all. They're just starting to someone's just starting to like invest time into it versus and I know you can't compare a 4 team shooter to a 1v1 brawler. I understand that. We do that a lot with Melee here in the Splatoon community, and it's not always a fair comparison to make. But we don't get an update in 3 months, and we're like, man, this is just what the meta is. We can't figure things out. That's just is that a fair thought to kind of think? It's just like, man, we're not pushing this game hard enough because we're always expecting the next patch to change it up completely when maybe we could have just changed it up ourselves.
I think that there are some people who are very adaptive. I think there are some people who are thinking that way. Whether those are the most influential people aren't necessarily the case, but one thing that does give me hope, like you can look at, say, I brought up the V heavy, paint spam thing that's been happening. I think that you can look at that situation as, oh, one top player tweeted it and now everyone thinks it's the best thing ever. But I think that you can also look at it as, oh, I just learned a new way of seeing the game that I haven't seen before. I want to see if that's a thing that works for us. That's adaptation. And it may feel bandwagony at times, but I also think there are absolutely people who are considering that and factoring it in, and who would look for more of that information were it given to them. One of the things that the Melee community has had that I think we've always had some folks like this, but not to the same degree. There are some people that I call lab monsters who don't actually play the game at as high of a level, but they play the game specifically so that they can test things and find new ways to play it. And if you ever get too close to a top player's orbit, you will find that there are like 2 or 3 of these people for their character who are just feeding them ideas like, hey, this is a cool thing I found. You're the person who puts in the reps, who puts in the time to actually maybe be able to implement this thing. I want to see if this actually works. There are some scientists out there. And I think that there might not be, just based on the way that the game is developed, there might not be quite as many of those types feeding the top players information. But I do think that there's a lot more adaptation going on than we give credit for, especially at the highest level. I think those players, you can put any gun in their hands and they're going to wipe the floor with the vast majority of people. And I think a lot of the time, the ones that they choose to put in their hands are the ones that are actually suited to the situation they're in, fighting like the 1 or 2 other teams they know they need to beat.
Jim, what's on the horizon for you? What's your next couple of months looking like? Got any big plans?
In the Splatoon scene, not a ton that's immediately pressing. I'm going to be playing in LUTI. That's going to be taking a good amount of time that I spend playing Splatoon. But I'm excited about it because I haven't been on the grind in a while for very many things. And the last quite a few weeks now, I have been playing the game every day. I've been playing the game quite a lot. And I feel myself getting better. Like, I'm going in and saying all of those times that I was, afraid to press A on the X battle because I didn't want my rank to go down. I'm just going to press it now. I don't care if it's a bad map mode. I'm going to press the A button now. I'm just going to go in and spam a bunch of Sendoku sets. I'm going to tank the people who are really happy that they got to beat me. They got to beat Mr. Squid School, because that happens a lot, and that's something that's been frustrating that has kept me off the platform before. But I'm just going to go and tank all of that, and I'm going to just try and lose and get better. And I'm already feeling like I'm getting better, and I feel like if I keep that up, that I'm going to be excited about where I end up. So as far as content creation, right now, that has to take a little bit of a backseat to IRL job. That has to take a backseat to just making a little bit more money right now. Things are things are a little bit rough, but as far as my enjoyment with the game, it's definitely on an upward trend right now. And I'm excited to see, once we get the hang of things on trigonometry, once we learn how to play together a little bit more, get a little bit more, a few more reps, get some more pointers from coaches and everything, and we really start firing on all cylinders. I'm excited about where that goes, and that's about the most that I can say for what I'm going to be contributing. The one thing that I will say, though, that I almost forgot to bring up is that there is going to be a LAN coming up in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and that's something that I'm also really excited about. That we're going to start forming this like in-person community around. Um, and I'm trying to support that as much as I possibly can, which is part of why I'm talking about it here right now. But that I think is another next big thing for me. As far as online, as far as my content creation, that's where it is, and that's probably around where it's going to stay for now. But my connection to the in-person community, I am really excited to see how much that can grow now that everything's out of the way.
If you followed the Land Championship Showdown at all?
I have not been keeping track of like the goings on, but I'm very aware of what it is. And it is a personal goal of mine to try and help the land that's forming in my community to build up to the size that it can become a part of that event as early as next year. That's what I want to happen.
Okay, yeah, that's why I brought it up, just to be like, yeah, because I feel like the LCS has done a lot to elevate local tournaments. It has given it like not so much given it a purpose because it already had a purpose, but giving it an extra kind of incentive and connecting it more with all these other local things to where it's a local, but it's now more connected to the rest of the scene as a whole.
And regional identity has always been this really powerful thing in esports. Like, that was really what made early Melee as special as it was. That there was a guy on the East Coast who beat everybody on the East Coast. There was a guy on the West Coast who beat everyone on the West Coast. But this was in like 2004. We didn't have a way to play this game online. Nobody had ways to play games online. We had to show up to each other's houses to be able to do that. And those very first tournaments where those people were meeting were so electric because people had been like talking all this crap about it, and now they got to see who actually came out on top. Like, traveling with a group of your friends to something a state over, so much cooler than going to a place where everyone is a stranger. Like, now you're the invading force, or like now you have to repel the invaders. And obviously, like, it's just more squid friends to play the game with, but it gives it a sense of stakes that I just don't think is there in something that's more like neutral ground. And that's something that I really miss from Melee, that I'm really excited is starting to flourish the way that it is in Splatoon. For one of my videos, the video on Hyperdive, I had to go and watch some sets from H-Town Splashdown. God, that event is so good. Like, I wanted to be there. I got excited just watching it, and these were the only two teams that were at that event that even had anybody in the Plus server. So you get top players going out to this and supporting those things. The scene's going to explode because there's going to be this really cool in-person thing. You will get people who are not online, who do not have social media, to show up to it because it's just a cool place to be. And I think that those in-person connections are far more valuable than anything you're going to find exclusively online.
Jim, it's good to have you back. It's good to see you around
Thanks.
again. And
it is good to be back.
And it's it's even better for me because you can just take over an episode. I don't have these are the easiest scripts I got to write whenever I got to bring you or K-Bot or someone else like that on.
Just let me yap.
Just let them yap. Because you don't have the platform to do that anywhere else other than here.
Yeah, no, totally. This is the only chance I have to get any of my ideas.
I'll see you around, buddy. We'll see you around.
I'll see you around. Thanks for having me on.
And that was Jim from Squid School, in case you didn't know where Jim was from. I didn't pay attention to what the idiots in chat were saying, but I could Clam Blitz, you definitely earned the title of being an idiot in chat today with the things you were saying consistently. So congratulations to you. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Popcast. I should probably spend time with my family and then knock out Division 2 and Division 3. Once again, play in tournaments this week. It can only, it could probably hurt you if you like do really horrible, I guess. But play in tournaments this week. That's a key thing to do. Do not bother people in the seating council. If you'd like to be a part of the Popcast in any way. Oh, here's the question. I want to do an episode of the Popcast on Sunday after the divs come out and do taking your guys' calls then. We'll probably just wait till Monday, but I don't know. I'm probably going to be bored or like burned out because low ink is going to be that day. But the next episode of the Popcast, whenever it is going to be a fun episode of the Popcast. You don't want to miss it because we're going to be taking your calls pretty much exclusively to get your reactions to whatever it is that's going to be coming out with the divs. We're going to raid someone. Let's raid. Where's chat? Where do we type this in? Okay. Let's go to Burb Don. Let's do that. Yes, let's go with that. Okay. Get vaccinated, stay safe, wear a mask when applicable. Have fun this week. Enjoy the ride of LUTI. Who knows? It might be another year before you get a shot at it again.